Am I muted?
All right, all right, all right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. This is Stormy B Man of the Stormy B Man channel, and welcome to the Three Wise Men of Boxing. Right. How's everybody out there this morning? We are ready to give you another live show. Let me first off introduce you to my panel. We have the boxing scholars. We we have Kurt Sugar and also Scrapbook Boxing. What's going on, brothers? How you doing this morning?
Man, I'm doing great, man. What's going on, Stormy B, man, on this beautiful Saturday? What's going on to my brother, Scrapbook Boxing, man? How y'all brothers doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, Curtis. How you doing, my brother?
Great.
Stormy B, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great as well, man. Feeling blessed. A beautiful day here in the Shy, and just uh, up bright and early and ready to talk it up with you, brothers, this morning, and with our viewers out there and listeners.
Awesome. I want to thank the chat for allowing us a week just to enjoy the Memorial Day weekend. I hope their Memorial Day weekend went just as well. Had some good grubs and some good cookouts. But we're ready to cook today.
Yes,
Yes, indeed.
indeed. Yes, indeed. I'm sorry, Stormy. I'm just excited, man. You know, it's great. This platform is great. I'm with two boxing scholars, man. It's a blessing that the Lord, put us together so we can do a show to bring you great content and knowledge. I learn from these guys. I learn from the chat, man. The chat is funny and they're witty. If you get something wrong, they correct you, which is good, And I like the involvement. So the chat, you guys make the channel.
Absolutely. Um, you know, it's a wonderful thing to be able to talk about the sport in the detail that we go into, and then have that wonderful interaction from the chat where people can basically keep us not only on our toes, but keep us in the loop of our recollections of the boxing experience. Because sometimes, the experience is you see a fight, you enjoy it, you file it in your memory bank, and you move on till there's another event or something. But a format like this gives us a chance to relive the experiences and also bring someone new into the experiences who may not have had that opportunity. And there's a reciprocity in that, where it's like you're sharing, you're reliving, and you're initiating all at the same time. So it's a total complete cycle and circle. Uh, that's at least kind of how I see it. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fact. And it was a time, once again, we always go back to this, this topic where there was a time where you would discuss boxing almost 24 hours a day with so much going on. Now it seems like there's more politics and more, you're not sure exactly what's going on next type of a thing. But yeah, as long as we can continue to talk this boxing, man, we keep it alive. And, as far as we can, that's the best we can do. But I love discussing boxing old school, mid school, and getting the facts out. That's what it's all about. And discussing with brothers like you guys.
Yeah,
Boxing, when you had your superstars, is the type of sport that you need stars to give the sport, put in the forefront. Boxing is an underhanded sport. It could be obscure. Like today in 2019, June 1st, there's nobody that's the face of boxing. There's fighters that we know because we're in the boxing world, like Canelo Alvarez and Deontay Wilder and, Anthony Joshua, but there's no face of boxing. People really don't understand the sport. The face of boxing is a guy like Muhammad Ali and Joe Louis and Jack Dempsey and Sugar Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson. That's the face of boxing that can carry the sport on his shoulders. There's a lot of politics, like my brother Scrap said. There's some questionable judging from the boxing judges. I know the sports, the inner workings, so I know what go on. Boxing always been like that, but it always seemed to survive because it's always going to have that big fight that captures the people's imagination. So despite all that, the black eyes that boxing has suffered throughout the decades for years, it's always seemed to survive. It will get knocked down, boxing itself, get up, brush the trunks off in his gloves and keep fighting. And that's why we love the sport, because it has so many thrills.
yeah. And with that said, I would like to let the listening audience know, because I purposefully didn't put it in the title for today's show, but the subject today, what we're going to kick things off with, will be like the top 10 controversial and worst decisions that we can recall in boxing. Now, this won't necessarily mean that our top 10s are the same, and it won't mean that these are the only ones. It just means that for our recollections, and even from some of the chat's recollections and listening audience, you might have some that may match up with what we share, or you might have some that we may have forgotten about. Because remember, this is a sport where there's so much that has transpired in such a rich and deep history that I'm certain there'll be plenty that we have forgotten, equally as what we can recall. So uh, with that, I would like Scrap to kick things off for us. Scrap, what can you bring with us early on with this particular subject this morning?
Well, boxing was, can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we hear you
Yes.
just fine.
Okay. Boxing has always been controversial because it's opinionated, it's subjective. Unless you have a clear-cut winner, you're always going to see things based on the way you feel. You're going to have a subjective opinion on why you think this fighter won or why you think that fighter won. But there's some fights that just can't be controversial, and there's some fights that can be. My example of that is the Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney long count. Now, it depends on how you look at it. At that time, they didn't have a man outside the ropes counting first, and the referee would pick up the count. Dave Barry just took it on his own admission because the rules had changed back in 1927, and Jack Dempsey was supposed to move to a neutral corner. Now, that was negotiated in the contract after Jack Dempsey had defeated Jack Sharkey. He had already lost to Gene Tunney in Soldiers Field. So he forgot that rule. That was something he was involved in. So as far as controversy, I mean, you had a man holding a stopwatch. He was an old fighter by the name of Battling Nelson. He had his controversies with Joe Gans. That's another one we'll get into. But, you know, and he said it was 14 seconds. From that point on, everybody said 14 seconds. And he was, I don't know, 60-something years old at the time. So controversies will always be around in boxing, and it's great to discuss it. But Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney, the second fight, definitely was a controversial fight. Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston, the second fight, 1965, and Livingston, Maine. You know, that's a whole big conversation we can get into with that particular one. And I'll just shoot one more out there. Tim Witherspoon. I was at that fight at Madison Square Garden. It was part of the HBO tournament. And yeah, it was for the WBC and the WBA. Now, I remember that like yesterday, because at that time you had Tony Tubbs, who was supposed to be fighting Tim Witherspoon, providing he got past, you know, his fight, and that was James Page. And James Page had an issue. It was a whole lot of stuff going on. And it was said that Tim Witherspoon went down deliberately 3 times to get out of the contract with Don King. So, you know, there's so much controversy that we can talk about, and I'd love to get into this discussion.
Yes, sir. What about you, Kurt?
You know, I done seen a lot of dubious scoring, to say the least. I think it has an underling to that. You know, politics and certain promoters have powers that be. But I want to get off probably the worst decision in history. And I'm going to throw y'all a little curveball, because this is not a professional fight. This is an amateur fight involving a super duper star that we all know. It's the worst decision in amateur and professional ranks. And that was Park Si-hun over Roy Jones Jr. It was, you know, it was so disgusting that, you know, the judges should have been stoned to death, man. It's by far the worst decision in the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, man. It was like really disgusting. Roy Jones dominated the Korean fighter for 3 rounds, battering him across the ring from pillar to post, and they awarded Hun the decision. I believe the judges faced scrutiny afterwards because the judging was so bad, you know. But me and my friends, we were so disgusted. And it put a stain on Roy Jones psychologically, because when he turned professional, there was a big fight waiting for him down the line. That was against Dariusz Mikuszewski. Mikuszewski didn't want to come to the States. He wanted Roy to come over there in Europe. And Roy said no, only because of what he suffered as an Olympian in the 1988 Seoul Korea Games. That was the single worst decision, amateur and as in professional ranks, that I've ever seen in my life, and I have some more coming up.
Yeah, that was crazy, Curtis. That was crazy. I remember that like yesterday, 1988 Olympics in Seoul, and Roy Jones was dominating all the events. I think there were people saying he was doing too much Ali and the rope-a-dope, you know, the Ali shuffles and all that kind of stuff. But it has nothing to do with it. You know, it's all about contact. The white portion of the glove making contact to your opponent. And he's done that more times than his opponent. And they robbed him. And it was disgusting. Just like Evander Holyfield, when they said that he hit the man after the bell. You know, just like Mayweather, Floyd Mayweather. I mean, there's been a lot of robberies in the amateurs against the United States, but Roy Jones takes the cake. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I second that what you guys just said. The Roy Jones incident for the Olympics was horrible. And I actually will link the two of those with what Scrap said with Evander Holyfield's situation too, where it wasn't after the bell. It was he tried to claim, the ref, that Evander hit on the brake when he was telling them to brake. The man had already thrown the shot, nailed the guy, and had the guy basically out on his feet. And then the ref, I don't know if they were trying to get these other guys in a situation where they had an opportunity at a medal because they were being so dominated. It's hard to speculate, but you can't get away from the idea of corruption when you see those things and they're so blatant. And they've been allowed to fester throughout the sport, both in the amateurs and professionally, because even the fans, they may show a, a, a lack of appreciation for those kind of things, but I don't think the fans use the leverage that they have enough to put the pressure on these people that they get away with such, what I can't even think of the word of it right now. It's like it's a disgrace, when you see those horrible things happen like that. And for a guy like Roy Jones Jr., the performance that he was putting on, it was like he deserved to receive, what should have come for him as a result of his efforts and his labors. It's like working all week and then you don't get your check.
Absolutely. Roy outlanded him like 86-32, but it was later, excuse me, it was later discovered the judges was wined and dined by the Olympic Committee. And usually when you have a dubious scoring in boxing, it's because the promoter wined and dined the judges. Don King was known for, when boxing, anything goes, unfortunately. That happened to Floyd Mayweather and what's his name? Seferin Todorov when Floyd got robbed. So that's why those fighters never wanted to fight abroad. If you remember, American fighters used to fight in Europe all the time. Muhammad Ali had tours and Sugar Ray Robinson. Many fighters fought abroad. But after the Olympic scoring or lack thereof, they decided, no matter if I beat this guy to a pulp, I'm not going to get the benefit of the doubt. They'll find a way to rob me. If Gerald McClellan and Nigel Benn, that fight was in the States, it would have been different because when he knocked Ben through the ropes, I thought it was more than 10. It was like a 10 count. And, he got time to recover and the rest is history. But, another fight I want to talk about that was disgusting is James Toney and Dave Tiberi. I thought Dave Tiberi clearly beat James Toney. I had it 9-3 in favor of Tiberi. That's how bad it was. And it was a split decision in Tony's favor. I couldn't believe my eyes because Tony looked so bad that day. It looked like he just woke out of bed and got into the boxing ring. And Dave Tiberi retired after the fight. I remember that. Do you guys remember the Dave Tiberi versus James Toney fight?
Oh, I do personally, yes. And that was a sad moment. I mean, we could talk about it in detail, but at the end of the day, this is what happens in boxing. If they feel that that opponent or that fighter can bring some money to the next show, it's very important that they make sure, unless he gets knocked out, he gets the victory, because that's all promotion. That's all getting an opportunity to make money. And a lot of times you got to knock these guys out clean to claim your status as a victor. And you're right, that was a robbery. That was a legitimate robbery.
Yeah, I recall it as well, and I'll also say that was one of those that I had forgotten as well. You know, it's like watching that. It was like, what is going on? And if the fighter who deservingly gets or receives the proper decision, not only is that good for boxing, forget this narrative of you know, the money guy, or the guy who has a lot riding, blah blah blah. But let's just back up for a moment and say it like this: if the guy who prevails, and in this case it was Tiberi, who clearly beat James Toney on that night, if he were awarded that decision, he has an opportunity to go forward, make money, have a little bit of a better standing financially and everything, economically, for his family and what he's doing in his personal life. But it'll also send a lazy, lethargic fighter who wasn't at his best and took his foot off the gas, so to speak. It'll send him back to the drawing board and make them rededicate themselves, if that's in them, if that quality lies within them, because sometimes it doesn't. And they have to come back, you know? And there's nothing wrong with that. Because guess what? That's life. That's the card that life deals you out here outside of the ring every day. You know, some things can go your way, some things may not. But when you're on that bad end, that bad receiving end, you go back and you correct things. You understand? You learn how to solve and resolve. But when you're just giving gift decisions after gift decision, it's like, my goodness, that was what was wrong with De La Hoya. You know, he had gotten so many gifts that he thought that that's the way it's supposed to go. Then when it started happening to him, because guess what? He became a little long in the tooth. Like, you hang around the game long enough, it'll happen to you. And guess what? He was like, oh, and he couldn't deal with it. You know, so he went in and got spatulas and everything and cooking utensils and did a number on himself.
That is very that's very true. You know, he thought because he was the golden boy and he was the face of boxing, no doubt. I'm not gonna short him for that. But when the Trinidad fight, he was shocked that he didn't get the decision. And that was part of his arrogance, because he thought if he would just show up in the ring and run around the last 3 rounds against Trinidad, for sure he was going to get the decision. I thought he beat Mosley in the second fight. I really thought De La Hoya won. You know, I thought he lost the Pernell Whitaker fight. I thought he clearly lost that against Felix Sturm. You know, when Felix Sturm jab had his head like a bobber doll, I thought he lost that fight. You know, and he was shocked because he thought, because he was a superstar and, you know, being arrogant, you know, and that fake smile he always had plastered on his face like the Joker, you know, that he was, no matter who he fought, he was going to get the benefit of the doubt. But this is boxing. Anything goes in boxing. And they told your butt that we don't care who you are. We gave it to the other guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You said it best, brother. One of the fights I wanted to talk about was Jake LaMotta. And they called the man Blackjack Billy Fox. And it was a controversy because, until this day, as a matter of fact, but he had a brother, Jake LaMotta, who was tied with the mob. And they kept wanting Jake LaMotta to try to work with them on some fights. And it got to a point where Jake LaMotta has been around long enough. And he said, you know what, I really want a title shot. But he never wanted to take a dive for anyone. But it got to a point where his brother just convinced him and said, look, you're going to be guaranteed a fight with a fighter by the name of Marcel Sedan, should he get back past Tony Zale. And Jake LaMotta said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not. I'm a man of honor, and I want to win it the right way. And it turns out that his brother owed the mob some money. And he finally confessed that to Jake LaMotta, and Jake LaMotta did it for his brother. So he was guaranteed $20,000, and that money went back to his brother to pay back to the mob, and he would get a title shot, which he just did. And they had a big meeting about that, and that meeting with Jake LaMotta and the commissioner changed all the rules in boxing. So it was controversy till this day, but it's also somewhat fact because Jake LaMotta said it himself. He said, "I took a dive against Billy Fox," and for years that was a big controversy. But it's fact. That's exactly what happened.
I remember that they start calling him Jake the Fake after that.
That is true. That's correct.
So let's take a moment, guys, and go into the chat with some acknowledgments because we have a number of people that have joined us since we first opened up. I'm going to take it back up to the beginning, or at least a little bit up close to the beginning. We got Jay Dixon in here with us. Barton South D Town is with us. GG, Sheldon Holmes. Blood Boxing is here. CB Sports TV. Jay Good. Joseph Brown. Newark Canada TV. Eric Jenkins. Lala D. Robert Stewart. Lowland Prophet. Is that everybody? I think. Yeah. Brooklyn Child Boxing Talk. Macadon 1. Yeah, I think that's everybody. JMJ 2121 and Slicio Pie. Slicio Pie. Okay, I get it. Brown on Boxing. What's good? Thanks everybody for joining us this weekend, this Saturday for the Three Wise Men of Boxing. Today's subject, we're talking about the top controversial and worst decisions in boxing. And there's such a rich history of that in the sport too that it's unbelievable. I wanted to bring one up, guys, that it's kind of more of a contemporary one, and I'm sure you gentlemen know the story on this one. And it was in Paris, France, when Pernell Whitaker took on Jose Luis Ramirez.
Holy smokes.
Dude, that fight right there was one of the most ridiculous decision outcomes ever, where you basically saw that Ramirez couldn't hit Sweet Pea with a handful of buckshot, and Sweet Pea not only danced circles around the guy, but totally outboxed him, totally outclassed him, made him look like he was an amateur in there with a man, and which he was, but that decision was ridiculous. What are you gentlemen's recollections of that? We could go with Scrap first. What do you think, Scrap?
But that was a robbery. That was a definite robbery. It was very sad, actually, because Pernell Whitaker was undefeated, and he earned his way there. He's done everything he needed to do to get there. And he outboxed Ramirez. No problems. This is in Paris, France. And Ramirez, he fought a lot in Paris, France, and he was under the promotion. And unfortunately for Whitaker, he got caught up in that. Now, I was at the fight in a rematch in Hampton, Virginia, when he fought Ramirez in the rematch. And that was like Ray Robinson fighting Jake LaMotta. I mean, he made it clear on that fight. It was a beautiful exhibition with Whitaker and LaMotta. Whitaker and Ramirez. But that first fight with Whitaker and Ramirez was a robbery. I've never seen a robbery like that. It was just so one-sided, and they gave it to Ramirez. Very sad moment. Unbelievable.
Man, I remember me and my friends watching that fight in the living room, man, and we couldn't believe what we witnessed. We were celebrating because we were big Pernell Whitaker fans. I said, "Oh, he's going to be the WBC lightweight champion in 1988," and it didn't happen. One judge had it, what, 118, 113 for Ramirez. So that means I could not believe how in God's good green earth, you could score that fight for Ramirez. But see, there's a backstory. There's always a backstory that people don't know about. You know, it's tough for a young fighter or up and coming fighter to fight a champion when there's a big fight looming for that fighter in the near future. Like I'm gonna go back real quick, like De La Hoya and Stern. They wanted De La Hoya and Hopkins, so it's really bad. You're in a tough spot because money. The WBC, which is Mexican base, wanted Chavez and Ramirez. And Whitaker knew that. So he knew he was at a disadvantage. Lou Duva, there was, allegations of impropriety for the WBC, favoring a fight between Ramirez and Chavez. So Whitaker, was up against it. So they figured if we rob Whitaker, he'll obviously become champion because of his skill, and he's very young. So it was a one-sided affair. I gave Whitaker like 9 to 10 rounds, man. Easy, and they robbed him, man. And when you think about Whitaker's career, he got robbed against Jose Luis Ramirez, he got robbed against Oscar De La Hoya, and he got robbed against Julio Cesar Chavez, who we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So those 3 fights, he got robbed clearly.
Yeah, that's facts. That's facts. You're absolutely right about that Chavez and Ramirez fight. They wanted to make that fight. That was a big, big money fight. And the WBC was always in for the Mexican fighters when it came to fights like that. And you're right about that. You're bringing up very good points. Whitaker didn't know that because that was the discussion that they had in training camp. What had to happen in that fight? You had to make sure you dominated the fight, which he did. There was nothing else he can do. He had to be cautious to some extent, but he did everything he needed to do, and he still got robbed. So he was going to lose that fight when he got off the plane, regardless.
Yeah, that was just one of those. I remember my dad, he was really into Sweet Pea Whitaker because he really liked Sweet Pea's natural it was almost he had a you could teach guys defensive tendencies and things like that, strategies, tactics, but Pernell had an instinctive way of going about how he fought and how to keep himself safe, and that's a talent, and it basically speaks to the notion that he understands something that's happening in the ring that a lot of fighters don't understand. They basically react or whatever, but his mind was like a computer in there. He could understand what's going on. And when he went up against the quality oppositions that were supposed to be those to test his mettle, that radar became increasingly open and more sensitive. And he was very much dialed in. That's why in those fights, matter of fact, we could run off at least 2 or 3 more controversial decisions involving him because they were always trying to give someone else an opportunity against him because he was that good. Would you guys agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I have no
Absolutely.
question about it. And we might as well go into Pernell Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez. I've never been so mad in a fight in my life, man. Once again, me and my friends watching it, it was highly anticipated match, man. And, Whitaker was turning him, and turning him and turning him. messing up his Chavez. For Chavez to be effective, you had to stand in front of him like Mildred Taylor, or he broke you down. A lot of fighters he broke down, Johnny Duplessis and Lightning Lonnie Smith and Rodolfo Aguilar. I can go on and on. Mario Martinez, because you got to be an idiot to stand in front of Julio Cesar Chavez. Latin fighters, they hit you on the hip so you won't go nowhere. That's an old trick, old school trick. And then they go to work. Trinidad used to do it. But, when you turn a fighter, and you move, Chavez was at a huge disadvantage. He could not operate. I've been studying Chavez for years when he came to America and he knocked out Roger Mayweather, but that's what Whitaker did. The plan was to turn him, and he was very frustrated, visibly frustrated. You could see it in his face. One thing I didn't like about Chavez as a fighter, as a person, he never gave you any credit. He used to whine and cry and, this guy, this. It's almost like you had to stand in front of him so he can operate, when he took apart Edwin Chapo Rosario. But Whitaker was a different fighter. He was a better fighter. Whitaker, he was in the ring with a great fighter. And see, this is the brilliance of Don King, because Don King knew Whitaker was a better fighter than Chavez. So that's why he staged the fight in Texas, to give Chavez a push in case there was a close fight, or in case he was losing. He had the benefit of the doubt because the fight was at the Alamo Dome, and he was right, and I believe at that time Tyson wasn't available, so his moneymaker was Chavez. So after that, Whitaker wanted a rematch, but he said it had to be in Las Vegas. And Don King was like, no, hell no. You ain't getting no rematch with Chavez, because Don King knew Whitaker was a better fighter and he would beat Chavez easy. It was a bad matchup for Chavez, but that robbery right there was disgusting. I thought Whitaker won 9 rounds at least, maybe 10, but I say 9 rounds. I had it 9 rounds to 3. Stormy B-Man, Scrap, what can you tell me about the Pernell Whitaker versus Julio Cesar Chavez fight?
Yeah, real quickly, I'll just jump in on this one. Yeah, you're right. Chavez was the money-making machine at that time. Anytime you have an undefeated fighter and the style in which he fought, could very easily look like he was a destructive machine. So anytime you have a fighter like that, you're going to protect them. Don King was a master at protecting his fighters. And, Whitaker he was a drawing card, but at that point of his career, not like Chavez, because Chavez had the Mexican crowd and he had, various diversity crowds as well. But he was on a roll and they saw a bright future for Chavez. They did see Terry Norris in the future for him. They saw a lot of good fights, Mildred Taylor's, for him. Again, the rematch. But it was no way in the world that Whitaker was going to win that fight unless he knocked him out. Whitaker didn't have the power to knock out a Chavez. So Whitaker did what they wanted him to do, was, like you said, he kept turning him. And he won the fight, clearly. They called, what was it, a draw, I believe, right? Was that a draw?
It was a draw.
Right. So they figured that's the best way they can get out of that one, is at least a draw. They couldn't say he lost the fight. So they called it a draw just so that everybody can be satisfied. Now, you would think you would get a rematch out of that. No way was he getting a rematch with Chavez. That was a robbery, 100%. As a matter of fact, before I ended, I remember Whitaker telling Montel Williams, because he was hosting a fight, and he had interviewed him. And he said, on your show, I want you to take a poll. I don't know if that poll was ever taken, but he was confident that he won that fight before he even had a chance to take a look at it, on TV. He knew he won the fight. Sad moment.
Yeah, what I would like to add to that was in the buildup of the fight, it was basically pound for pound, and both fighters were considered 1 and 2, depending on who was your guy. Whitaker and Chavez, pound for pound at the time. What I noticed about Whitaker and how it was not a draw was, out of all of the opponents that Chavez fought, former world champions and titleists, because I think that world champions and titleists are 2 different entities. That's my personal feeling. Whitaker was the only champion who beat Chavez fighting him and outboxing him. He never ran from Chavez. There are guys who will move away from him and everything and would allow Chavez to build steam and momentum and come on like a locomotive. That's not what Whitaker did. Whitaker fired combinations and stepped around and kept turning him and would initiate activity and do the same, all while boxing beautifully. And Chavez was so frustrated in that fight, and he tried. He really did. But Whitaker was the better man. And this is why it's such an atrocity that they did not reward Whitaker for his efforts, because he didn't run. He fought the guy and he outboxed the guy. He outsmarted the guy. And that's when you deserve to get to seal the deal. Give me my victory. Award me my victory, because he fought him. It would be different if he ran. Like we can recollect with Oscar's choices against Trinidad in the later rounds, right? Oscar chose to move, thought he had a certain amount of rounds in the bank and all of this. Whitaker fought that guy bell to bell, and he deserved the victory. You could go back and watch that fight. It was like nobody had ever fought Chavez like that until, again, a few years later, Frankie Randall came along. And Frankie Randall, because he had a little bit more pop in his punches, and Chavez was a little more older too, but Sweet Pea Whitaker did it in extreme pristine fashion, as far as I'm concerned. And in my mind, I know what it is on paper. He whooped Chavez behind.
Yeah, Chavez always complained, like I said before, man. And like you said, he never saw the counter straight right hand that Frankie Randall threw. He got knocked down in the first fight. And people forget, man, he was wobbled many times in the second fight. And Don King, once again, in the second Randall fight, I had to throw this out there. Frankie Randall was coming out like gangbusters, man. And when Angelo Dundee said Chavez is one of the toughest fighters he ever seen, I disagree. Some people may, share those sentiments with Angelo Dundee, because he wanted the doctor to stop that fight. He kept what we call leading the witness. He wouldn't say anything, like a lot of fighters. They don't answer the referee when they want to quit. If you notice that, he would look at the doctor real funny. The doctor looks at, continue, and then they finally stopped it and they went to a decision and they gave Chavez the fight. And Frankie Randall buckled Chavez early in that fight, and he was hurting him with that, straight counter right hand. So when I think of tough fighters, I think of fighters like Hagler, LaMotta, Basilio, and Chavallo. I don't put Chavez in that class because, like I said, he always whined and complained when you got the best of him. But, that was a very disgusting decision. Another fight I want to go to real quick, if I had, is the ridiculous, one of my favorite fighters, Joe Barrow Lewis versus Jersey Joe Walcott, I believe in 1947. Jersey Joe Walcott, made Lewis look like an amateur. Lewis was getting long in the tooth. Jersey Joe was a very, very stylish fighter, very excellent boxer, good power, could move left or right. He had a funny style. Like, he would turn away. It was deemed cute in the boxing world. And he knocked Joe down in the first and fourth round, and he closed Joe eye. I remember that fight, seen it many times, and he beat the hell out of Joe that night. And when they was on their way back to the dressing room after Lewis was awarded the decision, he told Jersey Joe, he was like, "Sorry, Joe," because Joe Lewis knew he lost. And Joe had a problem with boxers. Ezra Charles, he would lose to. Max Schmeling, he was getting outboxed by Billy Conn against Marciano. Joe was old and he was finished, so he got knocked out through the ropes. But that was a terrible decision, man. I thought Walcott won at least 11 rounds, man, if not more. You know, they went on to fight a rematch and Joe knocked him out, the great Joe Louis. You know, that was the last hurrah. But, you know, that match between Joe Louis and Walcott was very dubious.
Yeah, Curtis, it's funny that you say that because that was going to be my next fight to talk about. But you're absolutely right. Joe Louis, as a matter of fact, he was heading towards the locker room before the decision was ready. He knew he lost the fight, you know, and I can honestly say, as much as I love Joe Louis in his career, he did lose the fight, clearly. And it was because of Walcott's arrogance, he lost the second fight, you know, but Joe Louis lost the first fight. You know, of course, it's all, anytime you see things like that, it's about making money off the fighter because he's a commodity. He's the guy that can put butts in the seats. And at that time, Joe Louis owed some money, and they wanted to get as much money out of Joe Louis as they possibly could. And, you know, he had to win in order for him to pull off another big money fight. So unfortunately, you know, he lost the fight. And they gave it to Joe Louis. So they had to make a rematch. And they told Joe, look, man, you know, you ain't getting no more gifts out of us, man. That's it. So he knocked out Walcott in the next fight. But that was a sad moment for Walcott because Walcott had waited many years for an opportunity to get the, you know, win the world title. He wound up defeating Izzy Charles in 1951. But that was a robbery. Absolutely.
Yeah. What I recall about that too is funny that we mentioned in this particular match after having talked about Whitaker and Chavez, because that fight almost emulates Whitaker and Chavez with two exceptions. The fact that it was fought at heavyweight and that Jersey Joe was an orthodox fighter. Because you could put Jersey Joe in Whitaker's place and Chavez and Lewis's in that first fight. That's kind of how the match went. I don't know if you guys would necessarily agree with that, but Jersey Joe boxed Joe in circles, kept turning him, giving him angles, and firing combinations. And it was like when Joe would stick out, you know, Joe had this little shuffle he would do, and Ali talked about that, which was why Ali said he could never beat me. You know, he had this little shuffle. It was almost like what Teddy Atlas exposed about Deontay Wilder when he's chomping at the bit to throw that right hand, and he gets up there. But Joe would do that movement, and Jersey Joe would move off of that and fire his combination. So Joe would have to reset. And in the point of resetting, he's getting hit with stuff from angles. And he ran into a couple of shots where he got dropped as a result of that. And the thing about it was Jersey Joe, that mobility that he had and the way that he could move his upper body and his shoulder. You never know what punch he was throwing. You know, he could knock you out with either hand. And he could knock you out with a short shot too. So it's like you had to be extremely careful with that guy. He was really talented. And it was just one of those things where it's like, what if he were given that decision? You know what I'm saying? Because Joe was fading. He was at that particular point in time, but he was also a very smart fighter that if you did get him one time and he fought you in a rematch, he wouldn't fight you the same way in a rematch. He would definitely change some things. So there was something to say about Joe Lewis's boxing IQ as well.
Well, yeah, both Joe Walcott and Joe Louis was the same age. And when they came into that ring, I think Joe Walcott had less wear and tear than Joe Louis. Joe Louis gave way over 100 boxing exhibitions in a war. And he was always entertaining, you know, for Mike Jacobs here, there, everywhere. So he was done. He was basically at the end of his career. He continued to fight because of the tax problems that he had. Walcott basically was coming at a point in his career where he was just coming in at last minute opportunities for fights because he had a full-time job. He had to feed his family. So Joe had a little bit more wear and tear. Joe Louis, I should say. Well, Walcott had what they call the Walcott shuffle. You know, he knew how to turn his body and offset you. And like you said, the Stormy Joe Louis, you know, as he shuffled in, there was time. But when he was younger, you couldn't time that shuffle. But when he
No,
was older, you could. And that's what happened in that particular fight. You're absolutely right.
and
Absolutely
and
right.
and I feel that you're absolutely right in your assessment as well. And when I was saying that Joe was aging, I didn't go as far as what you said because all those exhibitions and everything that equates to all fights in the ring, basically, and those workouts. But yes, he had more wear and tear, and that was a significant difference in there too. That absolutely.
Well, let me say, I want to bring up another fight that was disgusting, like bad food. I remember watching this fight. I was 12 or 13 years old. Me and my father, we couldn't believe it. You know, shout out to my father, man. I love him so much. He introduced me to the sport of boxing. You know, I wish he was here. I would have him on as a guest. You know, that was a fight in 1979 between Lupe Pintor and Carlos Zarate. Carlos Zarate was like a mythical figure from Mexico. I mean, he was
Oh
something
my
like,
God.
boy, can he punch. Boy, this man can punch. He used to break ribs and jaws and ribs, however you want to put it. You know, he had wars, you know, with Rafael Gomez. Rafael Gomez beat the hell out of Zarate, you know, changed everything. Gomez was an animal, boy, you know, but
And
this
he knocked
fight,
out Pinto. Yeah.
yep, yep, yep. Gomez knocked that Pintor on the undercard of Hearns and Benitez. I tell you, I recommend that fight. Please go watch Roberto Gomez and Lupe Pintor. That third and 11th round was a thing of beauty, man. That was a hell of a fight that night. We was standing up. It was so great, man, and going crazy and cheering for each blow. What Pintor and Gomez finally wore Pintor out and knocked him out late. You know, I think he hit him with a right hook and followed with an elbow. Gomez was dirty. He didn't give a hell. He hit you when you was down. I'm gonna do a profile on Roberto Gomez. He was terrific, man, until he met up with Salvador Sanchez, but that's another story. You know, but going into the fight, Lupe Pintor and Carlos Zarate, it was for the WBC Bantamweight crown, man, and I thought Carlos Zarate got robbed. He knocked Pintor down, you know, and he countered him all night. And Pintor was coming forward, but but it was ineffective aggression. Zarate was just a better fighter that night, and Zarate was teeing off on Pintor, and I could not understand even that at that age, you know, the scoring was different. You know, one judge had, I believe, 145, 133, and the other two judges had it 133, 132, something like that, you know, off the top of my head. But my father was cursing, knocking over ashtrays. My father was like that when it came to the sport of boxing. And I was looking at it like he was crazy, you know, but that was the, you know, sentimental times, man. When we talk boxing, I think about my father who passed right after the Hagler Leonard fight, you know. So that fight brought back a lot of memories, man. And I thought Carlos Zarate got robbed. Lupe Pintor, I was a big fan of his, but Carlos Zarate really beat the hell out of Pintor that night, man. He just couldn't knock him out, but you know he was famous for knocking people out. But you know what can you tell me about that fight, guys? Starting with Scrap.
Yeah, first of all, salute to your dad, Curtis, man. Yeah, I can relate. Same thing with my dad, man. Absolutely. But yeah, with that fight, man, I agree with you 100%. It was a hell of a fight, and I feel it was very controversial. You know, it's just one of them things. Like I say, you get these situations where unless you completely knock a guy out cold, there are times where it's not your night. You know, and that's not made from your decision. That's made from the promoter. That's made from some guys that's under the table. And it's just unfortunate. That's what happened to a lot of these guys. And I agree with you 100% on that fight. I remember that fight like yesterday. And it's just unfortunate for Penta, you know. I'm going to let Stormy cook on this, but I got another fight too I think you guys would like.
Well, from what I recall from that fight, and my dad, it's funny, you know, that's that era. Our dads were involved involved with boxing, man. You can't deny that because my
Absolutely.
dad talked about that fight as well. Um, these men, boy, boxing has changed so much, and then certain things remain the same. The skill set that these guys showed in their fight, you know, keeping the guards up, you know, fighting the distance and everything. And it's like, but also, you know, not a lot of wasted energy, you know, looking to throw punches with bad intentions, but at the same time staying within range to do damage, but just out of range to receive damage. It is something to behold when you can see technical boxers do that. Now, the one thing I will say about their fight is that it's like as they were given and taken, you could see where a judge could like totally favor one guy, but the decision was wrong. And the thing about it is it's at that point, and I can't stress it enough. It goes beyond who you like. It's like who performed, who earned it. You know, and fighters that earn their victories, they should receive their award. They should be awarded their victories. It's like, man, you put your body through so much turmoil and everything, and you know, you sacrificing time with your family and everything through training camps and all of this, and then at the end of the day to not receive your just due. It's just something terribly wrong about that. And in the sport of boxing, you know, we have a lot of tragedies outside the ring. And who knows, maybe some of these tragedies are led through with some of the pain and suffering these fighters go through. And it's like, man, you know, they give it all they have. And I don't think enough people pay attention to that aspect of the sport. That's what I have to say about that, because it's like it's a metaphor for everyone who participates at that level and been on the receiving end of, let's just say, unjust, you know, decisions. It has to have an effect on you.
Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, this wasn't the fight I was going to get into, but to segue off of your statement, you're absolutely right, Stormy. I think of that like I think of the Billy Collins and Louis Resto fight. But Billy Collins just couldn't take it anymore. And he just wind up saying, you know, I'm done with this whole thing called life. And, you know, you got to be fair to fighters when they're in the ring. You know, you can't unjust them. In this case with Louis Resto, you know, they did that. You know, it was between him and Panama Lewis. But it could play a psychological role on the fight. I've seen many fighters after their careers, never the same person that they went in. And it's just unfortunate. I just wanted to get into one fight, though, with Ad Wargas and a guy by the name of Mexican Joe Rivers. Now, we're going back to like 1913. Jack Welch was the referee. He was the same referee that refereed Jess Willard and Jack Johnson in 1915. And it was a double knockdown. And all of a sudden, Jack Welch decided to pick up Ad Wargas as he's counting out Mexican Joe Rivers. As a matter of fact, he was hired for the remainder of Ad Wargas's career. But that was very controversial because they had it on film. But you had a lot of fights like that. But I just wanted to talk about that fight.
I want to address something somebody said in the chat. You know, uh, somebody brung up, can we give an insight on Ezra Charles? And I thought that was very interesting, even though we talking about boxing controversial decisions and robberies, you know, but to ask about Ezra Charles, I thank you for that. I forgot who said that, you know, but I'm gonna tell you something, man, about Ezra Charles. He doesn't get the publicity and the recognition he so richly deserves, because we just got off Jersey Joe Walcott, and they're linked because they were rivals. And you look at the Ezra Charles and Jersey Joe Walcott fights, they'll change your life. You know, James Toney looked up to Ezra Charles. You know, I mean, they called him the Cincinnati Cobra. You talk about a boxer, a great boxer, puncher. You know, he's the quintessential boxer puncher. He had a record of 95 and 15 with 52 knockers. I could be wrong, but it's close. I'll try to remember numbers, man. My memory's not so good as it used to be, but somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's close. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, Ezra Charles, people don't know this. Ezra Charles started his career as a featherweight in the amateurs, a featherweight. So when you talk about Manny Pacquiao moving up, you got to throw Ezra Charles in there. He finished as a heavyweight. He started as a featherweight. You know, his amateur record was 42-0 as a featherweight. 42-0. You know, even though he lost to Marciano, you know, he was getting older. He killed somebody in the ring. I believe he wasn't the same Sam Baruti. You know, that's why James Toney looked up to him. A lot of the old historians label him as the greatest light heavyweight of all time. Great boxer, puncher, man. You know, puncher, boxer, however you want to put it. So I just had to shine some light on Ezra Charles, man. You know, them guys come from the deep South. I mean, people know him for being in Cincinnati, but he's from Lawrenceville, Georgia. You know, Ezra Charles, man, you know, one of my father's favorites. Great, 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 great fighter. Go and look at his highlights. You know, you don't have to look at a whole fight. They're doing some justice and look at his just highlight film, man. You know, the way he's to set up the knockouts. See, those guys, the Jersey Joe Walcotts and the Archie Moores and the Ezra Charles, man, they were different, man. They would dominate today. Ezra Charles fighting Sergey Kovalev, he would knock Kovalev out in the third round. He will play with him. He will outbox him, then knock him out. I'm telling you, he was that great. These weren't good fighters I'm mentioning. I'm mentioning great fighters. I get real passionate because they don't get the shine that they deserve. You know, and the Jersey Joe Walcotts and, you know, like I said, the Archie Moores, because he was fighting a black murderer's role. El Murray, he beat him. Holman Williams, I believe, he beat somebody else. You know, I mean, Ezra Charles was that good. 95 and 15 with 62 knockouts. I'm guessing 52 knockouts. You know, started as a featherweight and fought for the heavyweight championship of the world. Was the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, what can you tell me about Ezra Charles, scrapbook and Stormy?
Yeah, Ezra Charles, Stormy, I'll just quickly say, Ezra Charles was known also as, had he stayed at middleweight, he could have been one of the greatest middleweights of all time. Ezra Charles was a very special fighter. And like you say, he was from Lawrence, Georgia. He moved to Cincinnati when he was young. He was in a school, and he wound up learning how to box. But you're right, he was very small. He was about 126 and a quarter pounds for a good while before he actually moved up in weight. But he fought guys like the Marshalls and a guy by the name of Oakland Billy Smith. He was in there with Charlie Burleys and Archie Moores and the Walcotts. In fact, in 1950, he solidified his heavyweight championship by defeating and dethroning Joe Louis. So he did everything the correct way, everything you would ask of him. He was in there with Joey Maxim several times. I mean, he was one of the... That's why, see, when I did the top 10, I had the Black Murderers Row and the colored heavyweight, colored champions as ranked number 10. And he's included in all that because of what they went through. We got to remember, at that time, the way Floyd Mayweather can negotiate, he couldn't negotiate anything in the 1930s and the 1940s. Mayweather wouldn't have negotiated anything. He wouldn't have won half of his fights. So we have to look at the reality of boxing. Ezra Charles couldn't negotiate anything. So the victories that he did win, he won fair and square. He was that good of a fighter. And I'm very, very passionate about Ezra Charles because when he knocked out Sam Baruti, it took a lot out of him because Sam Baruti died, you know, in County Cook Hospital. And Sam Rudy had approached him in Stillman's gym because Sam Rudy was from Ohio. And Ezra Charles was getting all the shine, and Sam Rudy didn't appreciate that. And he said, I want to take you on. Now, he didn't have the skill level as Ezra Charles, but Ezra Charles was coming up in the rankings. And they wound up fighting each other, and we know what happened with Sam Rudy. But Ezra Charles was one of the greatest fighters in the entire history of the game. If you look at some of his highlight reels, the moves that he's making at that time, guys are still trying to learn today. The way he used to hit the heavy bag, the way he used to hit the speed bag was very special. The way he skipped rope was totally different. He was a special fighter, Ezra Charles. Salute to him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember Mike Tyson talking about fighters, and someone had asked him about Evander Holyfield. And this was back when Tyson was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. So that had to be back around 1987, 88, something like that. And as Tyson was critiquing Holyfield, he said, he reminds me of a fighter. I'm trying to think of who it is. That's who it was, Ezra Charles. Ezra Charles had that same tenacity, had the same fearsome left hook, had that same quiet man's approach. He wasn't very vociferous or whatever, but boy, he spoke with his fist. And he could run off combinations against an opponent, and he always seemed to catch guys at the end of that left hook, trying to get away from his combinations. It was amazing. If you go back and watch his highlights, or just watch some of his fights, you will see how he would set people up and bait them into certain things. And as Scrapbook was just saying, I even seen training footage of him and the way he did skip rope and punch the bag in the gym and everything. It was a little bit different from what you see most fighters doing. And he had a snap at the end of his punches, you know, a real, like, that torque that was concussive. It was like he could throw shots, and when he nail you a shot, it has something on it, you know what I mean? And then he could follow up with a finishing blow. Ezra Charles was like very entertaining to watch as far as offensively. You know, there's not a lot of guys who did it better than he did. He had a little Sugar Ray Robinson in him offensively, you know, and it's not strange because that era, those paths, you know, were close proximity, but it's like what he seemed to bring and what Kurt initially mentioned, that him coming up from such a lower weight and being able to contend and even end up fighting heavyweight it's just amazing within itself. Could you picture Manny Pacquiao going up to light heavyweight or something like that? It's like, that's ridiculous, man. So
Not at all.
yeah, so it's like, think about that for a moment, and you think about him. What a fighter, what a man. And you're absolutely right, Kurt Sugar, when you say that fighters like that just don't get their just due. But I will make it, you know, I will make it I will make it an effort to, at some point, like even when I do my Friday chop sessions or something, I might have a segment or a corner to, like, just a comment on guys like that, because they do need to be kept out here in the public's eye, and so that even current fighters have something to look to and aspire to, because it's one thing to aspire about the money, but it's another thing to aspire toward the character and the legacy.
Absolutely, man. Oh, go ahead, Storm. I mean, go ahead, Scrap. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, one thing, Curtis, my brother. I just want to say, Take a look. If you really want to know what we're talking about and you want to understand how to set up punches, type in a guy by the name of Pat Valentino and Ezra Charles. Take a look at how he set this man up. And then you can come back and understand the conversation that we're having about Ezra Charles. He was a real fighter.
Absolutely, man. And I just want to say, Scrap, I saw that fight where Kid Matthews versus Danny Nardico, man. Wow.
Oh,
Goodness gracious, man. That uppercut he was landing. How did Nardico take them uppercuts, man? Whew. But even though, we'll get back on the robberies, man. And another fight I want to talk about that was a robbery, man, was George Foreman and Axel Schultz. Axel Schultz beat the hell out of George Foreman that night, outboxed him, outpunched him, did everything, and they awarded a fight to George Foreman. Axel Schultz was a German fighter, came over here. I remember watching that fight, man. I said, man, this guy can fight. I said, oh, George lost this one. So when they gave him the decision, it was another black guy for boxing. We don't need that in a wonderful world of boxing. But that was a bad night for boxing. It was a bad night for Axel Schultz because he really beat George Foreman. What can you tell me about the Axel Schultz and George Foreman fight, Stormy B, man?
I remember watching that fight on HBO, and I was thinking, like, because I didn't know anything about Axel Schultz at the time. And I think that he was a hand-selected opponent by George or George's people, or if George was his people, I don't recall. But I remember thinking, like, this guy, he's giving George his stiffest competition. And at that juncture, of course, in the sport. And I just remember him, first of all, he was a very durable guy, Axel Schultz. He could take it. But the shots that he was landing on George was kind of like, he fought George similar to how Holyfield fought him. He didn't run away from the guy. He was able to keep him turning. He kept his punches and combinations in George's face and kept George like covering up. And I remember George being pretty battered up too at the end of that fight, showing a lot of facial damage. But it was just one of those fights again where a guy who you don't know, he comes in and he gets the job done, but he wasn't awarded the victory. And we all know why. It's Big George. He was the face of what HBO was doing at that time and everything, and selling grills and whatnot. But Axel Schultz beat him, and he beat him thoroughly. That's what I recall from the fight. And it was amazing. I think I saw Axel Schultz fight one more time against someone else, and he didn't fare as well, but people stayed away from that guy. It's like a lot of fighters who were at the top of the division at that time, they didn't necessarily want to meet up with Axel Schultz.
yeah, I remember that George Foreman, I think he got kind of robbed a little bit with the Tommy Morrison fight. So it goes back and forth. But you're right with the Axel Schultz. He definitely defeated George Foreman, and they gave it to George Foreman. But then again, George Foreman was bringing money in at the time. Like you said, he had the grill going. He had, he was being talked about. He was a part of the HBO. He was in a contract with HBO. I think he was commentating with them as well. So you're going to get that kind of thing. And it's unfortunate. That's the way boxing is. They don't have the kind of rules that would protect you from that. But I agree. Definitely Axel Schultz. He definitely defeated George Foreman. It's crazy. But Alexis Arguello and Aaron Pryor, the Black Bottle. What do you think about that, guys? Curtis and Stormy.
Oh man, that will be a mystery. That's just like who shot John F. Kennedy. Who's on a grassy knoll. You don't know what was in that bottle. There's speculation. I heard water, then I heard juice. I heard everything, man. I don't know what was in that black bottle. Panama Lewis, he would never say. There was speculation. You know, I heard a couple of people say a couple of things about what was in the black bottle. You know, did it give him energy? Aaron Pryor had a cold, so I gave him, I don't know what was in the bottle. You know, I'm gonna ask you guys a question. Do you think it would have made a difference if there was no black bottle at all?
I'll just step in, Stormy, real quick and just answer my, what I think. I think psychologically it helped him, but also it's amazing how he recuperated very quickly. So I don't know. Aaron Pryor, when he first came into that ring that night, it's amazing how, and this was November 12th, 1982. And it's amazing how when he walked in, he stood wide-legged. He had that long robe on, and he was pointing directly at Alexis Arguello. And he had a menacing look on his face. Because remember, what he went through with the Tommy Hearns and he went through with the Ray Leonards, he wanted some form of redemption. Now, he had knocked out Antonio Cervantes for that title, WBA junior welterweight strap. But he didn't have enough. He still needed more to solidify who he was. So he definitely, he came to fight that night. Would it make a difference or not? It's hard to say. I mean, he did recover quickly in between rounds, but who knows? Who knows? Very good question. Stormy.
Yeah, it brings me back to that song, Living in the Bottle. Remember that?
Yeah, Gil Scott Heron.
Yeah, while Kurt was talking about it, I couldn't help that song was playing in my head. And if I could play it over the airwaves, I would have played it while Kurt was talking, but I didn't want to get flagged for nothing. But that's what exactly. Dude, I think at the end of the day, we don't know what was in that bottle, but that man fought above and beyond his own capabilities on that particular night. And I do think he was assisted. I'm sorry, Aaron Pryor, I respect him and I respect his accomplishments in the ring. But he did something a little abnormal that night. And that's the thing. Had he shown that over a duration of fights, that would have been different. But he didn't. That particular night, he looked like something more. You know, and that wasn't a character thing, because usually when you look like something more, it's a character thing that could rise. It's something that's brought out of you. And this is something that people out there listening right now, pay attention to what I'm about to say. Because when a person's intestinal fortitude is challenged or tested, there becomes a moment, a defining moment, where that person can either rise to the occasion or fold under the occasion or meet the challenge head on and see what happened in that event. Prior looked beyond what he normally is. You just have to wonder what the hell was in that bottle. What was, because there were some things that were taking place there that were just abnormal to me. And that's what my common sense tells me. But because nothing was ever really proven and said, oh, he cheated, he did something that he wasn't supposed to do, whatever, then we have to accept what the outcome was. However, there's one more aspect that you have to consider here. That was Panama Lewis over there.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, nobody takes a right hand from Arguello the way Pryor did in that 14th round, 13th round. There's no way. There's no way the leverage he got on that shot and the way he lifted his head up to the ceiling and he came back, shook it off almost as though he liked it, and came back and knocked him out with almost a 15, 16 punch combination. Sports alone, not just boxing, marathon runners, when they're running to a certain point and they can't even run anymore, they can't run to the sideline to get the water from you. You have to meet them halfway. They're so fatigued. And a man in a ring taking punches and get hit with a right hand like that and have the ability to come back, it has some questions that needs to be answered. It still does.
Absolutely, man. But what made Pryor? He beat Arguello in the second fight, dominated him. But that right hand he took, Arguello threw beautiful straight right hands down the pipe, boom. And your head jerked back, and his head jerked back violently, and Pryor just took it, man. Pryor, fought in a whirlwind manner, man. When he took the title against Cervantes, he would get knocked down. I remember when he fought Manuel Stewart fighter, Dewan Johnson. You know,
Yes.
um, Dewan was trying to knock his head off like Charlo did Harrison, but Pryor got him out of there. Pryor was a great, great, great fighter, man. But some of my friends say he would have beat Leonard. I'm not. I disagree with them. That fight, and they say Leonard ducked him. Leonard, that fight was signed. People don't know that because Leonard was going to fight Roger Stafford in May of '82 to take a warm up fight. Then he was going to fight Pryor, but he had the detached retina. So not only the Pryor fight was canceled, the Stafford fight was canceled. But Pryor was too reckless for Sugar Ray Leonard, and a lot of people don't know they were such good friends. Pryor used to stay with Sugar Ray Leonard's family for on summer vacations. People don't know that. That's the backstory with Leonard and Pryor. And Manuel Stewart used to train Sugar Ray Leonard, in the amateurs. And a lot of people don't know that as well. So that's just a little tidbit on the story of Leonard and Pryor.
Hey guys,
No,
I want
you
to take a moment and just acknowledge some people who have joined us in the chat because we've been going a little bit, and I just want to shout out some names that have joined us. We got Xavier, the boxing nerd, has joined us again. Welcome, Xavier. We've got Trey X is out there. Main Event Mark is with us. Cypher Supreme TV, Social Scientist, um, One of Them Ones Media, the man who loves Pernell Whitaker like no other there. uh, Macadon One is with us. Eric the Hat Man, he says salute, and we got Mello out there. Uh, you know, and please, people, smash the like button for these gentlemen, these boxing scholars. You got Kurt Sugar on here, and you got Scrapbook Boxing. These men are bringing some very well deserved information to you on the history of the sport regarding these fighters, their careers, and the decisions that they found themselves in through grueling matches. Please smash the like button. What I want to say, guys, is that we have people who are hanging with us and they're making comments, and they're engaged with our conversation this morning and afternoon. Um, the thing about it is like I think there's definitely what we're doing. There is a a window for that because some people like the purity of the sport, and that's what this conversation, this boxing talk is about. It's about the purity of the sport. We're not talking about the dramas and things like that, but these things, like you heard me mentioning a moment ago about the character of fighters and how a measure of a man in that ring, when he gets tested, when that trial comes, it's a defining moment. And sometimes it takes more than what their talent is. Sometimes it takes more than what the resume and experience that they've had up to that point brings. It's about what's inside that individual. Scrapbook, could you speak a little more on that notion? And then Kurt.
Yeah, definitely. It's important that you engage with the chat. The chat has a lot of information. They definitely want to make sure that their opinions are heard and they're clear on in understanding on what you're talking about. And the chat is basically the channel because they control the narrative and their opinions are more important than what we're talking about, realistically, because they're the ones that make sure that we stay in line on what we're talking about. So I always appreciate the chat. As far as old school boxing and new school boxing, that is the narrative. And, you know, we're going to stay on track with that. But it's very important to engage with the chat, because the chat basically makes up the show.
Can you read that question again? I stepped away for a quick minute.
Oh, it wasn't a question, Kurt. I was just asking, could you guys speak to the notion of, what we're doing with our boxing talk, and the fans and the people that I don't want to call our chat supporters fans, but those who have an interest in the sport, the purity of the sport, and how that what we're providing to them, and how we can have this type of form of boxing talk, how it can keep their interests up or whatever. Because today a lot of the drama outside of the ring and everything is focused on tremendously. So it's like, with what we're doing, can you speak to the notion of that and the significance of that, if they pay more attention to the purity of the sport, how they can get some type of fulfillment out of that even better, just by knowing the history? Because when you know that history, you know what you're looking at currently.
Oh, definitely. Let me explain. Some people said, they gave me accolades, and I don't have a good memory, but when it comes to boxing, I can remember, the fighters' birthdays, and where they was from originally, they records. It's kind of hard when you know hundreds and hundreds of fighters and you can guess their records and knockouts and all that. It just comes off the top of my head. I could, to this day, I don't know how I do it. It's just something that's in me. It started like when I was like 9 or earlier than that. My father had boxing books, so when I picked up a boxing book, he used to like, take it from me and say, rememorize it. Read that paragraph and rememorize Henry Armstrong's birthday. How many knockouts he had and stuff like that. So that's where that come from. But as far as the chat, they make the channel. Like Scrapbook said, we like your involvement. I'm always, having the chat involved, when I'm on my channel or Stormy's channel or anywhere, or the Three Wise Men. I'm very interested in what you guys have to say, because even though I know what I know, I still learn from you guys, because I may have an opinion about a fighter or a fight, and then somebody say something like one of the ones or Cypher Supreme, Joseph Brown, or somebody like that, and I'll be like, damn, he's right, So I always take into consideration what you guys say. We don't ignore the chat. Without the chat, we wouldn't have a channel. So, and Lala D, man, she always supportive, man. Bought me, I always wear my Sugar Ray Robinson tank top, Lala D. I love that tank top very much. Lala D is always in here, and she supports the channels, man. She learns, Kung Fu and what we talked about last night on the chop up session, and, boxing. She wants to learn. She come a long way, and she knows her stuff. It's hard to know everything about boxing, and I don't know everything. I'm still learning. I have over 11,000 fights in my DVD collection. I collect T-shirts. I used to sell DVDs to people. That's what people know me for. But it's so deep, and boxing is so rich in history. You're not going to know everything, because boxers have great personalities and their storylines. But I think the chat, and respect to the chat, because they keep the channels going. Not only the channel I'm on, but many channels, man. You got Fanon and World Breaker, which is I'm on, and you got Blue Blood and Blood Boxing, man, and I can go on and on and on. Cali Enigma, on and on and on. And that's a great platform for YouTube. We have monopolized YouTube, the LDBC, without even trying. We may not agree with everything. I don't agree with everything certain people do, but who am I to judge? But that's the way it is, but we as come as brothers and talk about the great sport of boxing, among other things. So I mean, it is what it is, man. I just love boxing. I know you guys love it. We have a fight today. I know people don't like Joshua. I don't have nothing against him. He's a fighter. I'm going to watch it, goddamn. But I'm glad to do a show with Stormy B, man. You listen to Stormy B, man, he sound like a coach in any sport, man. He sound like an NBA coach, sound like a boxing coach, sound like a baseball coach. He just got that aura about him. And Scrapbook Boxing is a phenomenal boxing historian. I'm pleasure to meet both of these men. And it was a great idea for us to come together as the three wise men of boxing to bring you great content, and we could talk about the great sport of boxing.
Yeah, real quickly, I just want to say, with my sister Lala D, she's all over the place. She's one of the biggest supporters. One of the biggest supporters. She's the queen. And I started out, my brother Trey X and Marlo on Marlo's corner. They always having the trivias and they always interact with the corner, with the chat. And that's where I met Lala D, and she's been a supporter all the way, and everybody in the chat. I'm looking at the chat right now. Salute to every single person. I may not name everybody all the time, but everybody in the chat has always been supportive of all the channels that they view and the channels that we're involved in. So, I never take it for granted. I have a channel myself, and, I got a lot of supporters on my channel, and I do appreciate it. And I try to do the best I very can to interact with them as well. So the chat it's all about the chat. All about the chat.
I agree 100%. And shout out to Marlo's Corner because a couple days ago he invited me on. I was participating in this chat, and he invited me on, and both he and Trey X had me on there with them, and well, we had good boxing talk that evening on the show, and we were on there so long, I had to go to bed, but those brothers were still cooking. But it spoke to the notion of why, like, I participate in other people's channels and chats, because when the talking about boxing is really good, you could just go on for hours and hours like that. And shout out to those brothers for inviting me on the other night, and that was the first time I shared with them. But we had very good boxing discussion, and that's all that I'm about out here. And I'm not saying nobody else is. I'm just saying that, you know, I lend my ear to that, the good talk of boxing. And as Kurt mentioned a moment ago, that I sound like a coach. I actually do have a background as a coach in boxing here in the Shy. I've worked in the gym, had did it for years. I've pulled back from that now, but that's a personal choice. But it doesn't mean that I can't still speak from the experiences that I had, or even share, about the knowledge and everything, because I believe this is the forum and the place to do it. The one thing I will not do is just speak off the cuff with something that doesn't have any substance to it, because I understand that in this sport you have to look at the first and foremost the safety of the fighters taking care of themselves. That's why when you hear me be critical of certain guys, and I'm saying a guy is wide open, or saying that a guy is being touched up too much, or this or that, that's the first thing I'm thinking about, because these men have families, and they have lives outside that ring. And it's easy to call somebody a bum because they're not up to the standard that you may think or require or ask of someone to have. But anytime a man steps inside those ropes, he's showing the courage that maybe someone else who's unwilling to do that doesn't have. So this is all with respect, and for as long as I can continue to do it and continue to support the other channels that are behind those basic philosophies and everything, I am more than willing to do that. And I appreciate you two brothers being on here, giving even further angles and diving into it from different aspects, so that the public that follow the channel and follow the other channels understand that, we do have a responsibility in certain aspects to bring it in a real manner, and not just be undisciplined about it, but where people can really understand. And then if they don't want to take what you have to offer, you just let them know, hey, you can research it for yourself. Go look at this footage. Go look at these films. Go look at these highlights. Go back and look at what we're talking about. And it's totally substantiated. So, that's what I like to say about that.
Well, I just got to say, guys, I got to make this beach run. So I actually got to exit early today. And I hope you guys understand that in the chat as well. But I just want to quickly take the time to say thank you very much for passing through and supporting us. That's where we get our energy from the chat. And Curtis, thank you so much, man, for your time today. And Stormy as well. Great conversation. Keep it going. Salute to the channel.
All right,
Peace.
Scrap. Peace to
All
you,
right,
Scrap.
Scrap, man. Peace to you, bro, man. We're gonna close out in a few minutes anyway, man. But hey, we doing something big, man. It's just the pleasure of working with you and Stormy B, man. True boxing scholars. That's the understatement, man. So enjoy your day, and with your fam, man. And we'll talk, man, like we always do. We'll talk behind the scenes, bro.
Salute. Thanks, brother.
All right, peace to you, Scrap. So, Kurt, for these last few minutes, would you like to take it in a different direction with the chat, and let's engage them a little more, because we had some great comments while we were talking it up, but we can go back and get more interactive with them.
Huh?
Was there any particular comments or maybe some questions or comment that you feel like you like to speak on, or address?
Well, the chat have any questions, we can answer questions to the best of our ability, or we can, have a, joint conversation with the chat. Because I
Yeah.
love the involvement in the chat. So chat, if you have any questions, we could take it away,
I found something. I found a comment that I like to go back and revisit very briefly. Trey X has said, it definitely wasn't water. If it's Panama Lewis, I'm thinking the worst. He was messed up. He was a messed up person for some of the things he did. And that goes back to the Aaron Pryor thing, what we were talking about. Yeah, you have to, say in regards to something like that, where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's why I said Aaron Pryor didn't consistently fight above himself like that in his career. Had he done so, you hear his name up there with the Leonards, Haglers, and whatnot, even more than you hear him now. But because we saw the results of that, it's like I just feel that there was something, and that's what my gut says. But he got his victories, and so be it. But I do have a question mark or asterisk next to that.
Well, I don't think it would have made a difference, but some people disagree with the water thing. You know, that's not the first time he did that. You don't know what was in the bottle. Like I said, like I heard it was first. I heard it was Perrier water. Then I heard it was cocaine mixed with pills and honey and orange juice. See, orange juice and honey expands your lungs, man. It gives you stamina in the later rounds, and that's not the first time he did that. What a fighter. So we don't know what was in the bottle. He mixed it with something. It could have been water. I heard it was water with crushed up pills. Then I heard it was cocaine, honey, and orange juice. So it's been, speculation. Like I said, what was in the bottle is just like who shot John F. Kennedy, who kidnapped the Lindbergh baby. Is always going to be, a mystery. So we just don't know, and that's not the first time he did it. Panama Lewis is just a shady dude. Who the hell knows what was in the bottle? you know, but Louis Resto, you know, said that he did it with a lot of his fighters to give them stamina in the later rounds. But with Louis Resto, he just took out the padding in the glove and gave him Pastor Paris or Paris or whatever.
Hey, Kurt,
You know, it's gonna keep us guessing.
yeah. Hey, Kurt, we got a question from Beverly Rose Boxing where she's asking, she would like to know our opinions on Yaki Lopez. She interviewed him on Thursday and learned a lot about his era.
Wow, Beverly Rose, what's going on with you? What's going on, Beverly Rose? Oh man, I was just watching a lot of his fights. A Mexican Indian man, he challenged, you know, Matthew Saad Muhammad, you know, twice. He was one of those. He was a very good fighter. He just came along at the wrong time, man. In the light heavyweight division, where it had Victor Galindez and Mike Rossman, the Jewish bomber, they called him, and Marvin Johnson, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad, you know, but he's known for his wars with Matthew Saad Muhammad, and he was involved. The second fight was one of the greatest fights you would ever see. If you watch that fight, it was fight of the year that year, 1980, and McAfee, New Jersey. It was back and forth. It's a great fight to watch, man. Yaki Lopez, he was never champion, but he was a champion in my book, man. You interviewed him. Wow, if it's on your channel, I'm gonna go and watch it, man, because I was a big fan of Yaki Lopez. I just like Matthew Saad Muhammad a little better. Yaki Lopez gave it all he got, but very good light heavyweight, just came along at the wrong time.
Yeah, I agree. And boy, those two fights with Matthew Saad Muhammad, man, and those, what was that, the seventh round, Kurt, where
Oh my gosh.
dude, it was like, how can you have two fights where the same round be almost identical?
Yep, yeah. It was the seventh or eighth round. I forget. You
It
know.
might have been the eighth. It might have been the
I think
eighth.
it was the eighth round. I think it
Yeah,
was the eighth round. Yeah, at the first fight was at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, and the second fight was in McAfee, New Jersey. The two fights was the same round in a particular round. I've never seen that before. Maybe Carmen Basilio and Tony DeMarco, but I have never seen that before. There were great fights, man. Both of them. Go watch those fights. I highly recommend Yaki Lopez versus Matthew Saad Muhammad.
yeah, amazing, man. And like I said in one of our other shows, uh, the way Matthew Saad Muhammad was throwing those lefts at him, I was like, man, some people don't throw that many lefts in a round. I mean, in a fight. And he threw all those lefts at Yaki. He was trying, and these guys, Yaki hit him with some bombs, absolute bombs. This guy moved around and then shook it off and smiled at him and started coming back. Like, this guy is inhuman, man. It was like amazing. If you guys haven't seen that fight between Matthew Saad Muhammad, well, the pair of fights between Matthew Saad Muhammad and Yaki Lopez, please go back and do yourself a favor and watch those fights and look out for the eighth rounds in both matches. Unbelievable warfare, something that you just don't see today at all. Unbelievable. And two conditioned fighters who can both pop with their punches. That's what you're talking about. The sport of boxing at its best, right there.
Absolutely, man. You know, the light heavyweight, the light heavyweight division can be good right now, you know, with the Eastern Europeans if they fought each other. But see, the difference is back then, the light heavyweights, they fought each other. Marvin Johnson, Matthew Saad Muhammad had wars, two wars. Same with Yaki Lopez, Matthew Saad Muhammad versus Richie Cates. You had Jerry the Bull Martin. You had the Davis brothers, Eddie and Johnny Davis, man. They all fought each other. Look at Mike Rossman versus Victor Galindez fights. They were all entertaining. They were very entertaining. Then you have Michael Spinks coming, who was a knockout artist, but people only remember the Tyson fight. Michael Spinks was a great light heavyweight who had this punch called the Spinks Jinx, and he threw an uppercut from hell against Marvin Johnson and knocked him out. I thought he knocked Johnson's head off, you know. So look at that knockout, man. Whew, you know, Michael Spinks versus Marvin Johnson, you know, but the light heavyweight division always had great fighters. You know, going back to Billy Conn, one of my favorite fighters, who was beating the hell out of Joe Louis. You know, Billy Conn had fast hands and fast feet. Great light heavyweight, Bob Foster. You know, I can go back years and years, you know, but those guys, man, the knockout with Bob Foster versus Mike Quarry on the undercard of Muhammad Ali and Jerry Quarry. You know, Michael Spinks or Michael Moore was a great light heavyweight. He was 24-0 with 24 knockouts before he moved up to the heavyweight division. You know, so the light heavyweights always been something. I wish the light heavyweights today fought each other. It was always a great division.
Yeah, and a follow-up remark from Beverly Rose and another comment after that from Joseph Brown. Beverly Rose says, yes, Kurt is on her channel, and he was very adamant about returning to 15-round bouts. You know, talking about Yaki Lopez. He would like to see fights return to 15 rounds himself. That's his personal feeling. And Joseph Brown says, Kurt Sugar, what was the greatest fight you ever saw?
The greatest fight I ever saw was Rafael Bazooka Lamone versus Bobby Chacon 4. They fought 4 times. I believe it's in Sacramento, California. I might be mistaken, somewhere in California. But go look at Bobby Chacon versus Rafael Bazooka Lamone 4. You know, it's the greatest fight I ever seen. Second, you know, is everybody's favorite is Castillo versus Corrales. Um, uh, what else? Yvonne Durrell versus Archie Moore. That was a great fight. You know, Ali versus Frazier 1, the Leonard versus Hearns 1. Those are my top fights, man. But Chacon versus Lamone is my favorite of all time.
Well, for me, the greatest fight that I've ever seen, and I will say it, you know, from like what I've seen currently, not like what may have been historically before my time. The greatest fight I ever saw, and I'll only make this assessment based on where I am today, not as it was happening, because I was still learning boxing and still, you know, taking in as a younger person. Um, it would probably have to be the greatest fight I ever saw was the fight between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas the Hitman Hearns when they fought the first time. And the reason that I can explain it that as such is that here you had two fighters in their primes that were at the best in the sport, one or two or equal 1A, 1B. But when they fought one another, they brought something out of each other that the other person had never shown before. Leonard was always a fast boxer, you know, had great movement, really good left hook, powerful left hook. Thomas the Hitman Hearns was a great boxer with a tremendous right hand that he later developed the nickname the Hitman as a result of that right hand, but he was originally the Motor City Cobra, and because he struck like a cobra. But when they fought each other, there came a point in the fight where one guy who was the boxer became the hunting, pursuing fighter, and the other guy became the boxer. It was like there's very rare times that you see fighters make that type of adjustment in a big match. You'll see a guy go into a match with a particular strategy in mind and try to keep that over the duration of whatever the rounds are, 10, 12, 15, what it is. But in this fight, it was the ebb and flow of the action where the fighters were actually forced into making changes, or otherwise they were not going to win. And it takes a hell of a fighter to decide to do that. In other words, come out of his shell and do what's not the comfortable thing for him and do what's necessary. And in that fight, in 14 rounds, you saw that between these two fighters. And it was an amazing thing to see. History tells us and shows us that Sugar Ray Leonard prevailed and won, but Tommy Hearns in that fight also arrived because Leonard had a little more luster on his career than Hearns did. Hearns was a very accomplished fighter in his own right, but he showed that he belonged at that level. And he doesn't get the respect that he's due for his accomplishments. And maybe it's because he suffered a couple of losses to Leonard and Hagler, but that doesn't mean he was less of a man because he was a true champion, Tommy Hearns. And that fight right there is probably the best fight I had ever seen.
That's my favorite fight because of the backstory. I thought Hearns came into the fight too light at 145 and a quarter. You know, plus he lacked experience. Remember, I believe he was 22 years old. He was young. But see, going into a super fight like that, I always believe that it's good to have a tough fight. I mean, nobody wants a tough fight. It just happens. But I always said that if Leonard never would have had that fight with Duran in Montreal, he wouldn't have never beat Tommy Hearns. It made him that much better when he had that tough fight, his first professional loss against Roberto Duran on June 20 of 1980. I don't believe in moral victories. A loss is a loss, but in his situation, it made him a better and tougher fighter because we know how good Leonard was, but the people in the boxing world chastised him because they thought he was a pretty boy. They thought he was given too much too soon. He made $40,000 his first fight. You know, Duran despised Leonard because of it. He was jealous of Leonard, of course, you know, but he despised him in his way because Leonard was the face of boxing. He had Franklin Sports. He had he had posters, commercials, all that, and Duran assaulted his wife. So Leonard was going to box just like he did in the second fight. But when Duran did that, he decided to fight Duran. And some people say he even won. Emmanuel Stewart said he won. I would have gave the fight to Duran, but Leonard showed you in that fight that how tough he was. And I just knew he was going to be win the rematch. The rematch was a guaranteed win because we didn't know how tough Leonard was. We know he had skills. He was coming to knockouts off Davey Boy Green and other fighters, But when he fought that fight, Duran, and he lasted 15 rounds fighting Duran toe to toe, I was like surprised, And if he would have never had that fight with Duran, he would have never beat Hearns in the first fight, man. It took a special effort to beat Hearns because he didn't know how well Hearns can box. Hearns had this long jab which detached his retina. Leonard, tried to gauge the distance in the first 3 or 4 rounds. He was moving around the ring, trying to get inside. After the 6th round, when he hurt Hearns, it changed the dynamics of the fight. And Leonard became a hunter, and Hearns became the boxer. But Leonard always had a deep reservoir. Well, certain fighters know how to win. Floyd Mayweather, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard. These are the guys that's in their rare air that can think down the stretch. Remember something, Stormy. Emmanuel Stewart said out of all the fighters, including Sugar Ray Robinson, that Floyd Mayweather was the smartest fighter and he can think down the stretch. Even though his fights were 12 rounds, but he gave Floyd Mayweather that much credit. Muhammad Ali was the same way, even though I thought Ken Norton beat him in the 3rd fight at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah. I would like to go back to the chat where Beverly Rose was following up. She was saying about Yaki Lopez. His point was that fighters would work harder to be in shape to last into those last 3 rounds. He also said that if a fighter is going to die in the ring, then it would happen in any round. For those who think that cutting 15 to 12 is that great of a difference. And I agree with that sentiment that, first of all, to be in condition to go 15 rounds means that you're less likely going to run into some problems medically or whatever because you're in condition. Fighters who are not in condition or fighters who cheat their conditioning can put themselves in harm's way easier. especially when you're cutting corners and you're not taking the proper steps to be efficient in a 15 round fight. And a 15 round fight is you break it down into 3 intervals: the first 5, the second 5, the third 5. And the thing about that is a lot of championship fights were really decided over those last 3 rounds, something that we don't have the benefit of today. Where the thing about it is, those last 3 rounds, someone may not have it to go, and someone may have hit a wall, or someone may have just needed those last couple of rounds to finish the deal or close the deal. So you know 12 really makes it easier for there to be controversial endings, draws, uh split decisions, and things like that can happen more frequently with the number of rounds being even. That's the way I see that. Uh, Lala D says Beverly Rose. He might be right. I guess I'm thinking about why they ended 15 rounds in the first place, but it can happen in any round. That's definitely a fact. Yeah. Uh, so I don't know, Kurt. It's really funny. Some people think that having more rounds, really turns the pressure up. But I actually see it in a different way, because if a fighter is in great condition, he's going to be prepared for that. And it's going to separate the men from the boys.
Yeah. Well, it depends how much punishment a fighter sustains in the fight. Like Mugabe and Hagler. Hagler had to chop Mugabe down, and someone said because he's tired. And so Gil Clancy said it's the punishment. That's why he's tired, which is correct. If you wear down a fighter, he's gonna that punishment and him being winded is gonna accelerate. In the later rounds, you're going to the body. Hagler was, to me, the greatest inside fighter I ever seen. He never gets mentioned, but that's how he knocked out Mugabe. Hagler had the best short punches I ever seen. He would take you apart once he fought on the inside. Go look at Hearns, Mugabe, Rodan. Look at those fights. And Antifermo. But that's how he chopped down Mugabe. So my point being, if you put punishment on a fighter and go to the body, and he wears down and he's going to get tired, and it's different when he just winded because he's out of shape. But when you punish a fighter and he's tired, it doubles the impact. I want to go in the chat. Slice of Pie said, can we get Kurt to talk about how Barbados Joe Walcott was literally robbed versus Dixie Kid? That's a very good question, man, because that's all that, it was later found out. Let me set it up for you. Barbados Joe Walcott was a great, great fighter. Joe Walcott, Jersey Joe took his name from him. His real name was Arnold Cream, but the original Joe Walcott was Barbados Joe Walcott. He fought Dixie Kid, I believe, in 1904. And he was beating the hell out of Dixie Kid, a black contender, and the referee just stepped in and stopped the fight, just like that, like it was nothing. It was crazy, and the crowd was shocked, and he awarded Dixie Kid the victory. So later found out Duck Sullivan was a late replacement referee, and he had a lot of money on Dixie Kid. So that's why he did that. And back in them times, man, they did whatever they wanted to do. So that was boxing. That's why boxing is so entertaining and amusing. They did things that would have your face drop. So that was the controversy with Dixie Kid and Barbados Joe Walcott. Slice of pie.
Yeah, Kurt, there's another one from the chat from Gigi, which is asking, do y'all think there are any modern fighters that could match the toughness and tenacity compared to the fighters of old?
Yeah, they are few. Terrence Crawford, has a lot of dog in him. He's highly skilled. Errol Spence, Canelo Alvarez, and Deontay Wilder. Those guys come to mind. Terrence Crawford being one, because Terrence Crawford has a meanness in him that nobody talks about. The way he was looking at Khan, he wanted to kill Khan. He had that Tommy Hearns death stare. And he they would have losses. They would have losses. They would have many losses, but they would compete and they have the toughness to hang in there. They will win some and they will lose some. But Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence and Canelo Alvarez and Deontay Wilder is the few fighter that can fight in any era. They will have some success, but they will also lose.
Yeah, Bonton South D Town says if not 15 rounds, 13 would be just as good to eliminate a draw. Someone will win no matter what. Um, I do believe we need more than 12 rounds in a championship fight. 12 is just too much of an even split of rounds. And you get this fighter mentality that some guys have developed. If they go 7-5, they win, you know, and that's that 7 rounds. If I could secure 7 rounds, I got this. You never want a person thinking like that. You never want a person thinking like that because you don't know what the judges are thinking. So it's like you have to win the rounds. And the thing about it is, by it being such an even split with 12, there's too many variables. You've got 12 rounds to work with. You've got 3 judges. Okay. All it takes is for 2 judges to have the same card, and you got trouble. But in a 15-round fight, that's not necessarily going to be the problem there. Do you agree with that, Kurt?
Yeah, I agree, but you're gonna see 12 rounds because you know why? A draw sells, controversy sells. Watch the success of the Wilder and Fury fight coming in February, because of the controversial draw. Controversial draw is big business, when you fight a rematch. Everybody's interested when there's a draw for some reasons, like kissing your sister, But um, I wish it was 15 rounds. I want to see. I'm used to seeing the 15 rounds. The 13, 14, and 15 rounds are championship rounds. I would like to see that, but you're not going to see that because of the death of Dooku Kim, a fighter which was tragically killed in the ring fighting Ray Boom Boom Mancini of the year 1982. That's when everything's changed. So you're going to um, you're never going to see 15 rounds again. I'll be shocked if that happens. But 12 rounds, get a draw, a big fight, it will sell. Just like if Errol Spence fought Terrence Crawford to a draw, people be highly interested in the rematch. Or Wild and Joshua, if that's a draw, people's going to be highly anticipating that rematch. So you will never see 15 rounds again.
Yeah, I believe that as well. But I wish they had never stopped it. But that Dooku Kim thing, it was way beyond. There was stuff going on with that was way beyond what the public knew with boxing, and they found a way to make some changes that, again, what was going on with him, it didn't have nothing to do with it being 15-round fight. It really didn't. So, um, with that being said, you know, I don't know, Kurt, would you like to go ahead and close us out, brother?
Oh yeah, man. Oh man, this been a great live stream, man. I can go on all day, but we're gonna close it out. We don't want to bore your ears, and I thank you for the questions, man, and everybody that's in the chat, Lala D, and GG, Cypher Supreme, and everybody, man, everybody. We thank you for Boot in South D Town. We thank you for anticipating and coming to our channel and talking about these fights. We're going to continue to have good hardcore boxing talk. We're going to come up with some more content, and I'm thankful that I can share my knowledge, and like I always say, same bad time, same bad channel. And one last thing, you can catch me on World Breaker Fighting, 2:30 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. I'm gonna start doing the Kurt Sugar versus the World again. I just been a little busy, and it's great, man. Me and I'm just gonna tell this about Stormy B, man. When he was on World Breaker and he was asking me these questions, I used to look at his questions. I was like, what the fuck? I just knew he was different. I just knew he was different. And me and Stormy talk like every day behind the scenes, man. We become very good friends. We have so much in common, man. It's amazing how you can meet somebody and have so much in common. And, we have a good chemistry on the show, with Scrapbook, man. So I just want to say peace to Stormy B, man. You doing your thing. And let's get Stormy B, man, over 200 subs, man. Subscribe to Stormy B, man, Boxing. Subscribe to the brother. We bring you great content. I didn't get to talk to my understudy, that's Xavier the Nerd, but, I also talked to him as well. But, hey, it's been a great live stream, Stormy, man. We're going to do this again next Saturday. I'm going to listen to some good music, man, eat some grapes, and get ready for the fights. My Yankees playing the Red Sox today. So hey, like I always say, same bad time, same bad channel.
Yes, sir. I wanted to say, and thanks for the kind words, Kurt. I wanted to also shout out everybody in the chat that rode along with us today for this episode number 6 of the Three Wise Men of Boxing. Salute to Scrapbook Boxing, who was with us, and he left a few minutes early because he had to do some personal things. But everyone who has smash the like button, and everyone who has not, please do so, and please show more support, because we're trying to bring you the most positive content that we can in the sport of boxing, speak in the sport of boxing. And I just wanted to say personally that it's been uh, quite a pleasurable ride, providing something that I was able to do with this show and bring people together like this so we could do this. And the support has been overwhelming, and I love everyone out there for it. And I just hope that we can continue to bring you the good and the quality of the sport. This is just amazing. If something like this was available to me a few years back, I might not have pulled back from the gym as I had done, but it's given me a new focus. So I really love the fact that I had the opportunity for that. And with that being said, I just want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in this morning and afternoon. I hope that you all can enjoy the fight cards that are on today. Maybe we'll see each other again later in the day after the fights take place. And this is Stormy B Man from the Stormy B Man channel, signing off for the Three Wise Men of Boxing, episode number 6. For everyone that's out there in the boxing community, shout out to the LDBC, and we're going to say peace.
Peace.